One of the things that I want to tap in on today is self-compassion, self-kindness, self-empathy. A lot of that around the world, all cultures, all statuses, all groups, just people by and large are dialing out of just self-care. And I'm not talking about care in a sense where you're buying products to enhance the way you look or buying products to contort your features, but I'm talking about the empathy, the kindness, the compassion that you will show to an animal, and most times you will show to someone else first before tapping in, dialing in, and checking in with self. Because in order to learn how to be with those individuals, you first got to learn to do it for yourself. And most times the reason why we become blocked and we don't do that, largely because we have become overly inundated with just overthinking and oversaturating ourselves with just about everything. And the biggest of it is those stories that we tend to tell ourselves that we endearingly call my truth. And see, it's a tricky thing, truth and integrity, because truth is exactly what you have perceived something to be, and is your take on how things are. Whereas with integrity, regardless to who's around, you are innately still move in whatever that right thing is. So it's a very thin line as far as the differences between the two, but yet and still there is a difference. Because in that truth, most times you have an audience. In that integrity, nobody's around. You're not being held accountable for anything, and the only way someone is going to know it if you actually say something about it. But guess what? What if you don't say anything about it? And it's just you and your creator and the elements around you. No one to actually verbalize what's happening. When in that instance you choose to do the right thing in that, without any regard for yourself gaining from it, in that moment you then have moved in integrity. Whereas truth, on the other hand, you have some other variables that come into play because it's your perception. And see, we can view the same thing, but our perceptions can be entirely different, because your takeaway and my takeaway can be completely different. So it's a tricky thing when we get into my truth. What you want to dial into is just paying attention to them stories that you're telling yourself. And they're stories of body image, and you looking in the mirror and you're just not satisfied with what you're seeing that's looking back at you. It can be that you have gotten so set in your ways that this is my new norm, that you have grossly misconstrued verbal abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse as being something that you can just endure. And one of the ones that always kind of blows me back a bit is when people say the words, maybe I'm just not enough. Or, here's the kicker, in families have become so fractured because you have people that have problems with other people, and they have begun to turn the people that are around them against the people that they have problems with, that in fact actually has nothing to do with the people that are being turned. And they view that as being loyal. This This is how you show your loyalty. I have a problem with them, so therefore you should have a problem with them. When in fact, the only one that has an issue is the person doing the turning. Isn't that something, folks? And it's just crazy. And it just continues from people that have gotten so in an enduring way that they've turned a blind eye to the spouse's wandering hands. And they say, it's okay, as long as they come home at night. And they think it's okay. Not that you had to talk about it and you've agreed to it, because that can happen. And that can be a balanced arrangement if it has been agreed upon. And guess what? Legally, let me step out of this arena or platform for a second. If you're entering into something like that, you may want to put it in writing. There's a thing called an open relationship, an open marriage, or nuptial agreements, prenuptial agreements. And in that case, because you're already married, this is something you can sit down with your attorney and you can put an intimacy contract in play that would allow for certain indulgences that are agreed upon by both parties or all three parties. It depends upon how many is in the relationship, okay? But that's another story. So there are ways to embrace and move into how this life has begun to mold and shift and transform itself into the ways of being of the masses. But what you don't want to do is to be the cause of the fracturing in your family. And then you proceed as if you have no accountability, largely because you've just been stewing for years in your own hidden misery. And you've resolved yourself, even though you see all of the chaos, the confusion, the not talking, the non-connecting, and months going by, and you don't even see that daughter, that son, that granddaughter, or whomever it is that once was in your life. So I submit to you, Word, for those that are seeking. We have to begin to start with ourselves. Self-kindness, self-compassion, and self-empathy. Because when we begin to do that, we begin to step out of ourselves and begin to peel back those layers of you that you've forgotten about. And lo and behold, guess what? You discover that there's some things about you that were there that you had no idea existed. How great is that? Another side of you to explore. But we have to take the time to tap in, dial in, and check in with what's most important, and that's you. And we tend to forget that because of these stories that we tell ourselves every single day, anytime we're in a mirror, even to the point when we sit into a conversation, these things that I just expressed, it spills out of your mouth as if it's sweet, fluorescent air that you're dispersing. That is fragrant and it's not. We got to begin to do different. Because when we go back to ourselves, what happens is we begin teaching ourselves from the lessons that we're learning as we move in that journey of compassion, empathy, and kindness to ourselves. And as we begin to peel back the layers, as we tap in and dial in and check in with ourselves each and every time, guess what? You're going to go even deeper. And it has nothing to do with church socialism or any other ism. It's just you healing self from within. Because guess what? Only hurt people hurt people. And if you're one of those that have begun to tell the stories of any of the things that I just referenced, you're hurting on some level. And it's time to eliminate the hurt, because it doesn't have to be the norm. It doesn't have to be what is for you. But what it can be is your start to getting back to who you truly are. Because when you begin to learn those lessons from just those three things, life begins to shift and transform and begin to remold you from the inside, that reflects and shines outward every cycle of the way. Because it's all temporary. None of it will remain. It only has remained as long as it has, largely because you've forgotten who you are. Or, for whatever the reason, you just stopped caring. But however the reason, it doesn't matter. The reality is you are aware, if for no other reason, because you're watching this now and you're hearing it. And you know, at the end of the day, whichever of those that have resonated with you, you're the one that needs to start. And you got to start with you. Nobody else matters. Because when you start with you and you better you, it makes everything around you for the betterment, not just for you, but for all things. And that's inclusive of those that you may have done things to, that you may have come against, or even said some untruths to someone that may have been an enemy, now your frenemy. And to gain favor with that frenemy, because in your brain, you wanted to get even with whomever it is, or someone you may have perceived that you hated, and you begin to tell that frenemy tales of what somebody else said, when in fact the tales that are being told to that frenemy are your words. You said these things. And the sad part is, it wasn't something that you came to on your own. It was something that you may have gotten from a parent, mother, father, an uncle, a cousin, who knows? But it didn't derive in you, but you became the messenger to spew it, the ugliness, to anyone who would lend an ear. And what that frenemy is not aware of is that there are other people right around them that know that truth. Because that person who's the frenemy now, that befriended you, that was once your hidden enemy, and you may not have even known it, but utilize you just to hurt someone else. And that's when it becomes a detriment. Because all of that plotting and scheming and just ugliness, it only tears down the village. It tears down the person. And in the end, the only one that's going to be hurt by it all is the person that actually started it. And they're the ones sitting back with no accountability whatsoever. But they're the master of their own hurt. And they continue on hurting people because they're hurting. And even those are still deserving of some compassion, kindness, and empathy. Even though you may want to choke them out. But trust me when I tell you, when you confront and release your next encounter with them will be something that is just of pure sweetness. Not that you're kissing your butt or you're being unlike your authentic self, but it will be a sweetness within you because that load is no longer on your shoulder. And you don't harbor anything other than the sweetness of life and the blissfulness and grace of the kindness that you will show that person. And move in it. Live in it. Because what's going to be gravitating at that point of people that begin to bear witness to that is now that you have rebranded yourself. You've remolded yourself. And what's in front of them now is someone other than what was brought to them under a misconception. So I hope all of this makes complete and total sense to you. And if it does, definitely leave us some feedback. Definitely like and love what it is that we're bringing to you today. And again, subscribe, because these platforms, they want to make sure that the value that's being added by them bringing us to you through their vehicle is a vehicle that's showing accountability through the analytical numbers. So definitely subscribe to us. And we'll continue to do what we do, how we do, with you in mind as we press forward. So continue, as always, as I close this out. Be kind to yourself. It teaches you how to be kind to others as we move in a grace that dims the light of anything that is perceived to even want to come against you. It will have no place. I'll end this invite.